The moment your heart stops beating, the world you know vanishes. The colors of the living fade, the sounds of the city or the forest go silent, and you are left in the profound, heavy stillness of the end. But for the ancients, this wasn't a void. It wasn't a lights-out scenario where consciousness simply ceases to be. For thousands of years, across every continent and every culture, humanity has mapped the territory beyond the veil with a precision that rivals our modern maps of the stars. They didn't just wonder what happened after death. They knew the roads, the rivers, the gatekeepers, and the terrifying trials that awaited the soul. Today, we are going to walk those roads. We are going to traverse the freezing wastes of the Norse hell, navigate the bureaucratic nightmares of the Chinese Diyu, and stand before the golden scales of the Egyptian Duat. This is the ultimate guide to every mythical afterlife explained. To understand where we are going, we have to start with the culture that turned death into a grand, complex science: ancient Egypt. To an Egyptian, life was merely a dress rehearsal for the journey through the Duat. This wasn't just a place, it was a gauntlet. When you died, your soul, or your car and bar, didn't just float away to a cloud. You woke up in a landscape of fire, turquoise forests, and lakes of burning coal. The Duat was populated by monstrous entities with names like He Who Dances in Blood, or She Who Is Clothed in Snakes. To survive, you needed a guidebook, which we now call the Book of the Dead. It contained the secret names of the gatekeepers because in the Duat, knowing a demon's name gave you power over it. You would travel through 12 regions, each corresponding to an hour of the night, following the sun god Ra as he fought the chaos serpent Apophis. If you made it through the gates and the monsters, you reached the Hall of Two Truths. Here, you stood before Osiris and 42 judges. Your heart, the seat of your soul and your memories, was placed on a golden scale. On the other side was the feather of Ma'at, the personification of truth and cosmic order. If your heart was heavy with sin and outbalanced the feather, it was thrown to Amit, the devourer, a terrifying beast with the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and the hind quarters of a hippopotamus. If Amit ate your heart, you suffered the second death, total annihilation. You ceased to exist. But if the scales remained balanced, you were welcomed into Aru, the reed fields. This was a perfected version of Egypt where the crops grew taller than men and the sun never set, a place of eternal harvest and peace. But as we move across the Mediterranean to ancient Greece, the tone shifts from a trial of morality to a journey of shadows. The Greek underworld, or Hades, was not necessarily a place of punishment, but a place of inevitability. When you died, Hermes would lead your soul to the banks of the river Styx, or the Acheron. There you would encounter Charon, the skeletal boatman. If your family had placed a coin in your mouth, you paid your fare. If not, you were forced to wander the banks as a restless ghost for 100 years. Once across, you passed the three-headed hound Cerberus, who was friendly to those entering but would tear apart anyone trying to leave. You then stood before three judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. Most people, those who were neither exceptionally good nor exceptionally evil, were sent to the Asphodel Meadows. It was a grey, misty plain where souls wandered in a state of mindless neutrality, forgetting their lives and their identities. It was a dull, eternal existence. However, if you were a hero or a particularly virtuous person, you were sent to Elysium, a paradise where the sun always shone and life was a perpetual festival. But if you had offended the gods, you were cast down into Tartarus. This was a deep, lightless abyss located as far below Hades as the earth is below the heavens. Here the punishments were tailored to the crime. Sisyphus was forced to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to roll back down every time he reached the top. Tantalus stood in a pool of water under a fruit tree, but the water receded when he tried to drink, and the branches lifted when he tried to eat. In the Greek mind, The afterlife was a reflection of your impact on the world, a cold reminder that your actions echoed forever in the silence of the dark. If the Greeks feared the silence of Hades, the Norsemen of Scandinavia embraced the roar of the afterlife. For a Viking, the manner of your death was more important than the manner of your life. If you died of old age or sickness, what they called a straw death, you were sent to Helheim. Ruled by the goddess Hel, whose body was half living flesh and half blue rotting corpse, Helheim was a cold, damp and misty realm located deep within the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil. It wasn't necessarily a place of torture, but it was a place of gloom, where the dead ate from a plate called hunger and slept in a bed called sickness. But if you died bravely in battle, your soul was claimed by the Valkyries. Half of these warriors would go to Freya's field, Folkvanga, while the other half were taken to Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain in Asgard. Valhalla was a warrior's paradise. The ceiling was thatched with golden shields, the rafters were made of spears, and every day the warriors would go out into the courtyard and fight each other to the death, only to be resurrected in the evening to feast on the meat of the boar Sarimnir and drink mead from the udder of the goat Heidrun. This wasn't just a party, it was a training camp. These warriors, the Einherjar, were being gathered by Odin to fight one last time during Ragnarok, the end of the world. In the Norse view, the afterlife was a preparation for the final battle, a way to ensure that even when the universe fell, it would fall with its sword in hand. Across the ocean, the Aztecs of Mesoamerica viewed the afterlife as a grueling 4-year marathon. When a person died, their soul began a journey through the 9 levels of Mictlan. This wasn't based on how you lived, but rather on the natural progression of the soul returning to the earth. To help the deceased, a yellow dog called a Solo-Itzquintli was often sacrificed and buried with them to act as a guide. The traveler had to cross a deep river, pass through mountains that crashed together, climb a mountain of obsidian shards that tore at the skin, and endure a wind so cold it could cut through bone. They had to face a demon who shot arrows at them, and a place where their hearts were eaten by a jaguar. Finally, after 4 years of trials, the soul reached the 9th level, the home of Mictlantecuhtli, the Lord of the Dead, who was depicted as a skeleton splattered with blood and wearing a necklace of human eyeballs. Here, the soul would finally find rest by fading into nothingness. However, like the Norse, there were exceptions. Those who died in battle, women who died in childbirth, and those who died by water or lightning went to different, more pleasant realms. For the Aztecs, death was a debt paid back to the earth, a long and painful journey back to the source of all things. In the East, the concept of the afterlife takes on a more bureaucratic and cyclical tone. In Chinese mythology and folk religion, the afterlife is Diyu, often described as a subterranean maze of courts. When you die, you are brought before the 10 Yama kings. The Chinese afterlife functions like a massive legal system. You are judged for every specific sin, and each sin has a corresponding level of hell. There are 18 levels in total, and they are visceral. There is the mountain of knives, the cauldron of boiling oil, and the forest of copper columns. But unlike the Western concept of hell, Diyu is not eternal. It is a place of purgatory. You stay there until you have paid for your sins through suffering. Once your sentence is served, you are taken to the pavilion of forgetfulness. There, an old woman named Meng Po serves you a bowl of the soup of oblivion. This soup wipes your memory of your past life, your family, and your time in the underworld. Once you drink it, you are reborn into the world to try again. This cycle continues until the soul achieves a state of enlightenment or perfection. The Japanese view of the afterlife, Yomi, shares some of these elements, but adds a layer of profound pollution and darkness. In the Shinto tradition, Yomi is a shadowy, unpleasant land where the dead go to rot. It is not a place of judgment, but a place of decay. The most famous story of Yomi involves the god Izanagi, who descended into the underworld to rescue his wife, Izanami. When he found her, she had already eaten the food of the dead and had become a rotting corpse infested with thunder gods. Horrified, Izanagi fled, sealing the entrance to Yomi with a massive boulder. This reflects a deep cultural taboo in ancient Japan regarding death and impurity. Later, with the arrival of Buddhism, the Japanese view evolved to include the concept of naraka, or the various hells, similar to the Chinese Diyu, where the dead are judged by Enma, the king of hell, who uses a magical mirror to see all your past deeds. In the ancient sands of Mesopotamia, the afterlife was perhaps the most bleak of all. They called it Irkala, the land of no return. It was a dark, subterranean cavern where everyone, from the lowliest slave to the greatest king, went after death. There was no judgment and no paradise. In Irkala, the dead were described as being clothed in feathers like birds, wandering in total darkness. Their food was dust, and their drink was clay. To enter, you had to pass through 7 gates, and at each gate, you were forced to give up a piece of your clothing or jewelry. By the time you reached the queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal, you were naked and powerless. It was a stark, sobering reminder to the Mesopotamians that life was to be lived to the fullest, because the end was the same for everyone. A silent, dusty void where even the memory of the sun was lost. Contrast this with the Hindu concept of the afterlife, which is both terrifying and deeply hopeful. In Hinduism, death is not the end, but a transition. When a person dies, their soul, the Atman, is taken to Yamaloka, the realm of Yama, the god of death. Yama is a formidable figure, riding a black water buffalo and carrying a noose. He reviews the person's karma, the sum of their good and bad deeds. If the soul has lived a virtuous life, it may spend time in Svarga, a heavenly realm of pleasure. If it has been wicked, it is sent to one of the many narakas, or hells, to be purified through specific punishments. But these are temporary. Eventually, the soul is reincarnated into a new body. The ultimate goal is moksha, the liberation from this cycle of birth and death, where the soul merges with the divine essence of the universe. For the Hindu, the afterlife is a classroom, a place where the soul learns the lessons it failed to grasp in the physical world. In the cold forests of the ancient Slavs, the afterlife was Nav. It was imagined as a green, fertile land located across a vast sea or deep underground. It was the realm of Veles, the god of the underworld, who was often depicted as a horned serpent or a bear. Veles was the guardian of the souls, and Nav was a place where the dead would go to pasture their celestial cattle. It wasn't a place of suffering, but a continuation of the pastoral life. However, to get there, the soul had to cross a bridge as thin as a hair, suspended over a river of fire. Those who were wicked would fall into the fire, while the righteous would pass into the eternal spring of Nav. The Celts had a different vision entirely. Their afterlife was the otherworld, often called Tir na Nog, the land of youth. It wasn't under the earth in a literal sense, but existed alongside our world, accessible through ancient burial mounds, deep caves, or by traveling far across the Western Ocean. In the otherworld, there was no sickness, no aging, and no death. It was a land of eternal music, feasting, and beautiful landscapes. Time moved differently there. A day in the otherworld could be 100 years in the world of the living. For the Celts, death wasn't a departure from life, but a crossing into a more vibrant, magical version of reality. As we look across all these myths, from the burning sands of Egypt to the frozen mists of Helheim, a pattern begins to emerge. Every culture used the afterlife to solve the problems of their earthly existence. For the Egyptians, it was about justice and the preservation of the self. For the Greeks, it was about the weight of memory and the tragedy of loss. For the Norse, it was about the glory of the struggle. For the Aztecs, It was about the long, hard journey of the soul. And for the Eastern traditions, it was about the endless opportunity for refinement and rebirth. These myths tell us that humanity has never been content with the idea of a simple ending. We have always seen ourselves as travelers on a much longer road. We built these afterlives out of our deepest fears and our highest hopes. We created monsters to represent our guilt and paradises to represent our longing for peace. Whether it's the coin for Karen, the feather of Ma'at, or the soup of Meng Po, these stories are the maps we drew to navigate the greatest mystery of all. As you sit here in the world of the living, take a moment to look at the world around you. The ancients believed that the veil between this world and the next is thin. They believed that every action you take, every word you speak, and every choice you make is being recorded, weighed and measured by the silent watchers of the other side. Whether you believe in a hall of shields, a field of reeds, or a cycle of rebirth, the message of the mythical afterlife is the same. Your life matters. It echoes. And when the silence finally comes, the journey is only just beginning. Think about the sheer scale of these visions. Think about the billions of people who lived their lives with these maps tucked into their hearts, terrified of the devourer or hopeful for the land of youth. These myths aren't just stories about death. They are stories about what we value in life. They are a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be extinguished. We have populated the darkness with gods, demons, and heroes because we cannot imagine a universe where we do not belong. So, the next time you look at the sunset, remember the sun god Ra descending into the Duat to fight the serpent of chaos. When you cross a bridge, remember the hair-thin path to Nav. And when you feel the cold wind of winter, remember the gates of Helheim. We are all walking the same path, following the maps laid down by those who went before us, heading toward a horizon that remains the ultimate frontier. The myths may differ, the gods may change their names, but the journey remains the same. The heart is weighed, the river is crossed, and the soul moves on into the eternal mystery. And in that mystery, perhaps we find the truth that has haunted us since the first fire was lit in the first cave. That death is not a wall, but a gate. And what lies beyond that gate is a story that we are all, eventually, going to read for ourselves.
If you liked this video, please hit the like and subscribe button for more.